think of some of the difficulties in Derrida, for instance, the question of the promise and the way these come very close to the difficulty of getting to time in such a sense that we cannot even glimpse it with the mind's eye, with the eyes of the soul, because the eyes of the soul are juxtaposed against all the visual things, and the things which appear to the eyes of the soul are in antagonism within the same field as the things which appear to the eyes. Supposedly, we are meant to remember, to be mindful. We have this instruction, as it were, from this text called Heidegger, to be mindful and to confront the Nietzsche text. This is what the text is guiding us towards. We're supposed to learn either what philosophy is in this way, or perhaps to answer the question, was heißt denken, what is thinking? We could go look at that essay through going into Nietzsche, who Heidegger says maybe he started doing something that wasn't philosophy, and then we could sense the play of that move. But nonetheless, it's as though we have this promise to keep, and it's something we're remembering from the past. Is that an obstruction then to what we actually want to do, which is to get to the event, supposedly? That too, thinking of the way Derrida frames these things so nicely, it's difficult to give expression to these problems that are so simple that we can scarcely express them, but clearly that too, the talk of the Ereigness is something we're remembering and something we have in mind and something we're trying to direct ourselves to, and therefore an obstruction, and the very basic concept of an obstruction would be an obstruction. Now let's look at some of the text. Migratory birds, winter is coming, come on, we soon have to set off. Against this, it is absorbed in the present. So do the birds that Nietzsche is talking about here, this animal that can't even forget, do they have the sense of anticipation? Are they like somebody that's going on a holiday that has a picture of the place they're going that they put above their computer monitor or so, and they're lost in the sweetness of daydreams about the mood of anticipation is tingling all over everything, and time is moving according to this sense that soon they'll be able to break out of the daily grind and head out onto the place of their vacation and so on. Are things even present to the migratory birds in this sense that they know that they're soon we're going to have to move off to the winter, or are they simply absorbed in the present? So Heidegger gives us something nice to ponder here. He presents to us three different ways to ask this question. One, seeing disappear. So the birds are seeing disappear / as forgetting. So is it that the birds are kind of absorbed in the moment, but it becomes available to them, present to them? They kind of, like a human being, they kind of get things where they're present and they can start thinking about them, but then that thing which is available to them slips away, they forget. So one, seeming to disappear as forgetting, perhaps meaning that the availability sort of slips through the animal's consciousness, as it were, the sieve of their consciousness. Two, being absorbed in the present, quote unquote, the present in scare quotes, being absorbed in the present - as forgetting. So is it that they're absorbed in what human beings regard as the available, as time as the available time, as possibly time understood as space and time the same, different ways of looking at the same thing. Time as what is available in a more vague sense, so we don't have to bring in modern physics. Just time as availability in any sense to the human being. So is it that the animals are just locked in within time, as it were, within this available block of time, that they can't see that they're in it because they're absorbed in it, like the seaweed grotesquely mushing around underwater in the nasty colors of a dead hummingbird, I would say. Now 3, neither, everything indeterminate. So this is the interesting. Interesting is in some way a bad word for Heidegger, but it's difficult to avoid our usual customary way of speaking, isn't it? Interesting is in some way a bad word because we just have a succession of interesting things, and we constantly bring them before ourselves, and it's a form of entertainment, and then we never get to that which is essential. And for instance, Zizek says one should be interesting, and this is one of his essential parts of his method, as it were, to be interesting. But to be interesting is, for Heidegger, not to get to what's essential, just to go to the next novel thing, the next novel thing. But do we have something here to be mindful about, to be uselessly mindful? So far as being uselessly mindful isn't, again, something that's actually obstructing us from grasping this question of, as it seems to me more and more, it's as though we have got stuck in one relation to time, and it were possible to sense the play of the other ways to grasp time. This too presents a project, as it were, which then could obstruct us. But nonetheless, if we can sense the play of it, as Heidegger says sometimes in his other texts, rather than get stuck on the seriousness of it, then maybe we are being guided by what Heidegger, the text Heidegger, let's say, stands there before us as though it had could point to this. So it seems to me these 3 statements come out of the problem that Heidegger is here in his confrontation with the Nietzsche text, saying, I believe what he's saying is, for Nietzsche in this text, the human being is put down as historiology. So historiology, not living in the history, not being absorbed in the spontaneous life of the history, but this meta sense of what history is, this overconsciousness, this being repletion, as it were, not just satisfaction, not just having eaten to satisfy ourselves, but actually to make ourselves sick with so much quote unquote meta, let's say, with this regard. And Heidegger says that the forgetfulness, the historialos, the animal, is said in this this circuit, as it were. It's said it's the animal and human are these 2 determinations that are warring within themselves. So it's not as though we are free of the hyperconsciousness because we're trying to use the anecdote of the forgetfulness to solve it, but we're still amidst it. And so even this claim, the animal does not even forget, the animal's living in immediacy, we can only approach it according to these determinations, which were already are already exercising us constantly. So this hard fact that all we can merely do is simply pose to ourselves the 3rd option, neither, everything indeterminate. But it's not obvious that gives us, there's no poetic force to that. It doesn't really show us anything. It just kind of says the current situation is inadequate, as it were. So one more time, I'll list them to cap it off. 1, seeing disappear as forgetting. 2, being absorbed in the quote-unquote present as forgetting. These are the conditions of the animal, according to Nietzsche, as understood in our first attempt to mindfully confront the text and see what's sense the play of the text. Or 3, neither, everything indeterminate.